Hi, my name is Everett, but you might know me better as Aspiring Spike over on Twitch. I wanted to record a deck tech in a league with this Grixis control deck I've been finding a lot of success with. Brewed this up on Friday the 27th of September, and it's been really strong. It's gone through a few iterations, and I am finally at a point where I really like the 75. Let's go ahead and discuss some of these card choices and jump into a league. So I'm sure what jumps out immediately are the cards from Throne of Eldraine, Drown in the Loch, Into the Story, and Mystic Sanctuary. These cards are all uniquely powerful, and I think they make Grixis a viable strategy again. For a long time, blue-white control has been the premier control archetype in Modern, and I think these cards really bring this archetype back into the fold. Drown in the Loch particularly is almost exactly what a control deck needs in Modern. Usually you can configure your control deck to beat just about any strategy, but the problem is you can play a lot of really effective removal spells, or you can play a lot of really effective counter spells, but it's hard to play both. And a lot of times you end up folding to combo decks or creature decks, and you are not able to main deck all of the answers to answer the wide variety of threats that are presented in the Modern format. Drown in the Loch being, if you can turn this card into kill any creature or counter any spell for 2 mana, that is an incredibly powerful effect. And we've constructed our deck to try to do that as consistently as possible. We're playing 4 Thought Scours. I, as a default, target my opponent with Thought Scour, but I will target myself with Thought Scour if I believe I want to play a Tasker on turn 2. If my opponent already has 7 more cards in their graveyard. We need them to have 7 or more cards because of Into the Story. We'll get to that in a little bit. And I also, in the blue mirrors, I'll often Thought Scour my opponent in the very late game, just so I'm not decking myself. And in the same way, if Drown in the Loch is kill any creature or counter any spell for 2 mana, if Into the Story is 4 mana, draw 4, this card is incredibly powerful. There is not a way in Magic without jumping through some hoops to draw 4 cards for 4 mana, especially at instant speed. That just doesn't exist on a card. And it's very strong when you're drawing 4 cards for 4 mana. It may seem a little innocuous, but 4 cards is a heck of a lot of cards. It's been very powerful, as I hope I can showcase today. I've been really blown away by Into the Story. And Mystic Sanctuary is also a really good card in this deck. Being able to tutor it for it late game with a fetch land to get back a Cryptic command, a Kolaghan's command, and Into the Story, generate some extra card advantage has been excellent. I think Mystic Sanctuary is really good. It does come into play tap sometimes in the early turns, but that's okay. We're playing some tap lands anyways and Creeping Tar Pit. We've also found a way to facilitate 3 Field of Ruin, which helps the Tron and Eldrazi Tron matchups, as well as can blow up like Celestial Colonnades in the blue-white mirror. We're playing a ton of 1-mana spells that can trade 1-for-1 with our opponent's resources. Fatal Push, Spell Snare, and Lightning Bolt. I'm playing 4 Fatal Push and 3 Lightning Bolt, which may look a little weird, but I think it's really important to kill Tarmogoyfs, Urzas, and Death Shadows right now in the current format. There's also a fair amount of Thought-Knot Seers. If things change, if more Planeswalker decks are more prominent, I could see playing 4 bolts and 3 push, or maybe even 3 bolts, 3 push, and 1 magmatic sinkhole is something I've been considering, but I've liked the split for now. Tasker is our only sorcery speed spell in the deck, as you might notice. I think there is a huge cost to playing any sorcery speed spell in a deck that has all instants. And so that's a big part of the reason why you don't see like a Jace the Mind Sculptor, Narset Parter Avails in the 75, just because there is a really big cost in tapping out for these sorcery speed threats instead of being able to hold up a variety of removal spells. But Tasker being 1 mana means usually on turn 3, 4, 5, you can spend 1 mana and hold up another interactive spell. I've liked Tasker a lot, and it's also good to play over Gurmag Angler because the activated ability is very relevant in a deck that's trying to go to the late game. We're also playing Force of Negation. While this card has some anti-synergies with Drown in the Loch, and it is often bad to 2-for-1 yourself in a deck like this, I've found this card is really just well positioned in the Modern format. It's felt important to have against Tron and Eldrazi Tron. In the blue mirrors, being able to cast Into the Story on your opponent's instep and making sure that it resolves with Force of Negation has been really good. I like having access to this card. You can mitigate the card disadvantage with Into the Story sometimes, and it is often just 3 mana counter a non-creature spell. I dislike this card against Death Shadow, and I dislike this card against Jund, but other than that, I really like Force of Negation in the modern format. We're playing one Torrential Gearhulk when I started to stream the deck, I was joking that this was my obligatory terrible grixis card that you have to play, because usually people will play like a Cruel Ultimatum for the memes, but I actually think this card is good in the deck. If Torrential Gearhulk is going to be good in Modern, it's going to be in a deck with Cryptic Commands and Into the Stories and Kolaghan's Commands. I think that this Gearhulk could be the fourth Into the Story, but I've won many games that I could not have possibly won if I didn't have a Gearhulk in my deck, and I think the first copy is good. And sometimes you can Thought Scour yourself if you have a Kolaghan's Command in your hand, digging for your Gearhulk and return it to your hand. And I just want to go over the sideboard kind of quickly. The sideboard has gone through a few changes and iterations. I was playing Alpine Moons and Ashioks in the sideboard for a little while to answer the Graveyard decks and the Tron decks, but Ashiok turns out to be a Nombo with Drown in the Lock and Into the Story. You exile their graveyard and then these cards no longer have text. So I pretty quickly cut the Ashioks for Surgicals, and Surgical Extraction is also good against Tron in combination with Field of Ruin and Thought Scour. If you can get a Tron land into your opponent's graveyard, you can Surgical them and then cut them off Tron forever. I don't bring in Surgical against Eldrazi Tron. However, I found our matchup against Mono Green Tron is much better than our matchup against Eldrazi Tron. So we are also respecting that matchup with 3 Ceremonious Rejections. I still don't think we're favored against Eldrazi Tron, but I do think that it's not so bad with these 3 Ceremonious Rejections in the sideboard. We have the third Force of Negation in the sideboard. Again, I really like this card against Blue-White Control. I really like this card against various combo decks. I like this card against Tron. I think this card is good in the modern format. Vendilion Clicks, they usually come in control mirrors and against big mana decks and combo decks. A pretty versatile threat to come out of the board for matchups where you need to be aggressive sometimes. Collective Brutality is mainly here for burn, although I will not bring it in against every deck where the duress effect is relevant, but I will sometimes bring it in against decks like Red-Green Valakut, decks like Ad Nauseam, where your removal spells are just totally dead, and you can have a more versatile sideboard card to bring in. I had Plague Engineers in my first draft, but I actually found Plague Engineer was not putting in all the work that it has been, in other decks like Jund. I think that a lot of these tribal decks are constructing themselves in a way to play as few 1 toughness creatures as possible to play around Wrenn and 6 and Plague Engineer. And I also think those kind of decks are kind of being pushed out of the format. So having access to a Damnation, a card that can come in against kind of all creature decks, and Engineer Explosives, which is good against creature decks and is also good against Paradoxical Urza specifically, I think that makes sense to cut the Plague Engineers. I think Plague Engineer is so good of a card that it warps the format in such a way that you don't even need it. And so that's the deck. Let's go ahead and run it through a league. And I'm going to keep this hand. Seeing maybe a little bit of tension between Thought Scour and Tasigur and Drown in the Lock here. We kind of want to Thought Scour both our opponents and ourselves, but we'll be able to make an informed decision on who we target based on what our opponent is playing. And it looks like they're playing maybe Lantern Control. I mean, that's usually what Codex Shredder indicates, although, I haven't seen this deck in so long that I'm not inclined to make any judgments just yet. Although I suppose that is what this is. And our opponent will be targeting themselves with Codex Shredders probably as a default. So I imagine we can cast a Tasigur here on our turn 2. I have to imagine that this matchup is good. We have 3 main deck Kolaghan's Commands. We have a ton of Ceremonious Rejections in the sideboard. Kind of surprised to see our opponent sleeving up Lantern Control today, but we'll see how it goes. I mean, we have drawn 2 really bad spells in this matchup, or 3 even if with the redundant Tasigur, the Bolt, and the Fatal Push. I'm going to exile the Drown in the Lock from my own graveyard to stop a possible Surgical Extraction. We have a Field of Ruin for the Academy Ruins, which is nice. If our opponent taps out for an Ensnaring Bridge here, we're going to have a long game. Oh, they are playing Urza. So this is part of the reason why we're playing Fatal Push, is we can actually answer Urza with that. So they named Tasigur with Pithing Needle, and then they pass. So let's go ahead and make sure that this Urza dies. And I'm going to Field of Ruin the Academy Ruins. Pretty flavorable Field of Ruining and Academy Ruins, and pushing this Urza. And we're going to have to pass since this construct is a 5/5 and our Tasigur is a 4/5. You get a pretty unreasonable amount of stuff for 4 mana with Urza. Card is really, really powerful. Like, there just aren't a ton of very effective answers to it in the modern format. I think the card was kind of a mistake, but that's a rant for another day, another video. Thought Scour. I guess we have to we have to Thought Scour ourselves because of Witchbane Orb. So no decision there. Kolaghan's Command was kind of a nice draw. Although we can't make our opponent discard a card because of the Witchbane Orb. So let's just pass. I'm probably going to take another hit off the construct, depending on what happens here. I'm just not very... If they put no cards into their hand with Ancient Stirrings, that's crazy. There must have been a bunch of more Stirrings and Urzas. But yeah, I think I'm content to just hold up Drown here, and then take 6, and then end of turn we can just Kolaghan's Command to destroy this and deal 2 damage to it. We can't target them with the discard again because of Witchbane Orb. But I'm also not too worried about the Orb. I think that we're pretty favored from this position, assuming our opponent doesn't have more gas here. If they have a Whir of Invention, we can force the Whir. Yeah, we have another Tasigur, so this is fine. There's still a Pithing Needle on Tasigur, so we can't be activating it. Now we can answer the Witchbane Orb. Let's go ahead and leave the second Tasigur in the graveyard. That way we can recur it with our Kolaghan's Command that we're probably going to be casting soon. And we did mill over and Into the Story for Mystic Sanctuary and Snapcaster Mage, Torrential Gearhulk. That'll be good going forward. Ensnaring Bridge, huh? Yeah, I think that we're gonna let this resolve and just kill it with Kolaghan's Command and then keep holding up these creatures. So let's go ahead and return Tasigur, destroy Ensnaring Bridge. I love Kolaghan's Command. This card is so fun. So now our opponent has 3 draw steps to draw 3 relevant spells, and we have to brick. Our opponent has messaged us. Yes, they said their Ancient Stirrings was very disappointing. Kind of lagging here. May have to pause the recording and restart Magic Online. Stand by. Okay, restarted Magic Online, which we've had to do a bunch since the update, but our opponent has 3 draw steps to draw 3 relevant cards because we can counter the first 2, and that also is contingent on us not drawing anything relevant the rest of the game. So I'm feeling very good about our spot. No need to hold up Force and Drown in Luck because your opponent, you can only draw 1 card a turn in Magic, so we only need to hold up 1 counter spell. Also, we're at 2 life. Forgot about that because we restarted. So would have been pretty bad to shock with the Watery Grave, I think. So it looks like our opponent did draw a relevant spell in their first draw step, which is nice. And I guess we may have problems countering 2 Whir of Inventions because this is a CMC 7 spell, and they only currently have 6 cards in their graveyard. So I mean, that could, if we ever draw any fetch land, we get to put a Kolaghan's Command on top. Although there is a Lantern of Insight and Codex Shredder, so maybe tricky. We are going to draw a Creeping Tar Pit, unless they Codex Shredder it, which I don't think that they're going to do. I think they're going to need to try to find an Ensnaring Bridge, but they need to find Whir of Invention, not Ensnaring Bridge. Because if they find just Ensnaring Bridge, we can counter it with Drown. But if they find Whir and they Whir for 7 again, then we can't counter it with Drown. So this is interesting. They have to target themselves with the Codex Shredder too. So if they have to dig super deep with Shredder and Pixis, and then they leave an important card on top, like I guess Polluted Delta is not that important, but because they can just mill the Kolaghan's Command we get back with Mystic Sanctuary. Okay, they're gonna sack their Lantern, which is good that now they put 2 more cards in their graveyard. Yeah, we won game 1. I think this matchup is great. I think we're not gonna have a hard time moving forward. The Urzas are a little concerning, but I think that I would much rather play against this deck than the Paradoxical Urza version. I'm going to board out these Lightning Bolts and these Spell Snares for 3 Rejections, a Force, and 2 EEs. Don't think that I want to bring in Clicks or Surgicals. I think that this is just going to be fine. Usually I don't love bringing in Surgicals in matchups where they don't generate any card advantage. Kind of the one exception being Tron, just because you can pretty easily get them off of Tron with Field of Ruin / Thought Scour. This is a weird hand. I think I'm going to mulligan. Our mana was kind of weird. Everything about that hand was kind of weird. Let's keep this. I think we're going to put back the Snapcaster Mage. We don't have a good cheap spell for it to flash back. It was likely just going to pitch to Force, and we can pitch Cryptic to Force if we really want to. I'm not sure if I'll force a Lantern of Insight if they play one. Seems like it just won't be all that relevant. Hard to say, hard to say. They are going to go for, both players exile a card. That's interesting. Well, certainly not going to force a Thoughtseize. I think that's usually inadvisable. So if they take the Force of Negation and we brick, then we're certainly going to have, open ourselves up to something big resolving. They took the Into the Story, which we can Mystic Sanctuary back. This is something I've talked about on stream, but the Jund matchup is really, really good because they just have such a hard time against Into the Story. And I'm going to shock here. I don't think our life total matters that much, and I kind of want to represent 2-mana interaction. But even if they Thoughtseize Into the Story, you can just usually Mystic Sanctuary it back, which has been pretty powerful. Glimmer Void is juicy. I'm getting really hopeful we find a Kolaghan's Command and make them sacrifice this Glimmer Void. Thought Scouring them to make future Drowns and Into the Stories online. Love to find a Kolaghan's Command. I will certainly smash this Pixis very thirstily. They have a Whir for 1 and our upkeep. I'll let this resolve. Not sure what I guess they're just getting Lantern. There's an Engineered Explosives on top of our library, and they have to make a shuffle. And we can actually draw it with this Thought Scour. And I think that's worth drawing. So 4 mana, target player shuffles their library. Not the most impactful. And then if our opponent only has 1 converted mana cost artifacts to play out here, then we are going to get this Glimmer Void. So we could force this Ensnaring Bridge and then try to get the Glimmer Void. I think that's a little unnecessary. We can beat an Ensnaring Bridge eventually. I'm not scared of it, and I think it's probably just going to be better to try to like get back into the story here, hold up Cryptic Command, hold up Force. It's certainly slower. I think both lines are defensible. Yeah, we can let Ancient Stirrings resolve. I'm really not too scared of anything this can get. I'll counter like a Lantern of Insight. Oh, they got Academy Ruins. That's pretty good. To get back Lantern, but I'm really mostly concerned about Urza right now. I'm not planning on letting my opponent have a window where we're gonna tap out and they can resolve an Urza, because that card is fucked up. And we can also they're gonna Pixis this, which we may just have to let go. Forgot about that interaction, even though we just talked about it. So let's play the Engineered Explosives on 1 here, and then our opponent can't really spend their time getting back Lantern. I mean, I guess they can. Like, there's no one stopping them, but they're just going to get it blown up, you know? So I was F6 there. I was not anticipating this. Although I don't think that I would have sacked in response to this Assassin's Trophy anyways. I think having the land here is actually a little more valuable than having just the dead Pixis, but certainly was not correct to just be F6 there. So I think that I'm going to return the Ensnaring Bridge and draw a card. And now we can... Oh, and we drew Into the Story. Awesome. Whenever you make mistakes like that, all you need to do is draw an Into the Story, and then you can never lose. And so if our opponent spends their mana on their next turn, casting Ensnaring Bridge, we get to Gear Hulk. And if they want to, spend their time recurring things, that's going to be fine. They're just going to, lose to this 5/6. I'll probably let Lantern of Insight resolve, but certainly not letting Urza resolve here. And we have Force up, but I'm not really sure what our opponent could have to stop this for 0 mana on their turn. You can't Force on your own turn. We no longer have a counterspell for Urza. That is something to think about here. So maybe we are supposed to Into the Story on our turn. So if we don't draw Drown in the lock, we can also Thought Scour and have one more look at Drown to potentially answer an Urza, which I think is fine. And I think I want to do that rather than resolve Tasigur, just because of how impactful Urza is. The card is so silly. Could Force this. I think if I draw a Drown off of my Thought Scour here, I'm not going to Force. I guess we're going to target ourselves because we have Snapcasters. Alright, now I think it's fine to Force. We can play Ensnaring Bridge, I imagine, which we have Kolaghan's Command for. Yeah, that's fine. We can Kolaghan's Command, recur our Torrential Gear Hulk here, end of turn. So let's go ahead and return Torrential Gear Hulk and shatter Pixis of Pandemonium, because there is like another line of text here where they can pay 7 mana and then put everything they've exiled into play, which will be bad if they have like Urza's exiled and Crucible of Worlds exiled. But we can go ahead and jump into match number 2 here. That was so fast I didn't even need to cut the recording. This is a weird hand on the draw. I think I'm going to keep it. We're going to hope our opponent puts a couple cards in their graveyard. Unless it's Dredge, then we're going to hope it's not Dredge. So we're playing against Burn, which has been a surprisingly good matchup. When I first put this deck together, I felt like the burn matchup was going to be horrendous, but I've actually been 2-0ing burn a lot, and I think the main reason is having access to Drown in the Lock to instead of just being a dead removal spell in the late game, it can counter your opponent's top deck burn spells. It's just been such a huge game. Right, let's go ahead and bolt the Swift Spear. It's possible maybe we should have played a tapped Tar Pit and then tried to drown the Swift Spear next turn. But if we just draw a land next turn and we are able to hold up Drown, I think bolting into Drown is going to be a little more impactful. It does hurt that we have to shock ourselves there. It also hurts that we've missed on land drops twice in a row. But it has 3 cards left. Did they mulligan? No, they kept 7. So we can counter, anything that they play here. The real question is, are we going to draw enough lands and be able to leverage our card advantage here to win? And we didn't hit a land in our first 3 draw steps, which is unfortunate. I will counter a lightning bolt here. I will use any opportunity I can to 1-for-1 with these drowns here. And it kind of looks like our opponent knows that, and they are playing slowly, but they have some instant speed burn that they're trying to protect. So because we just have so much action, we just need to use our mana. I do like running out Snapcaster Mage. Getting in any clock is going to be key here. I bet you the Snapcaster Mage does 8 to 10 damage at minimum here. They could have Searing Blades, but we'll happily drown that. Yeah, so opponent should have done this on their instep. A lot of people don't have a stop set on their own instep. So they have a Rift Bolt. I mean, if our opponent has 2 burn spells in hand and draws a 3rd one, we die, but I don't think we've had another play afforded to us this game. Them dealing that 1 point of damage with the Swift Spear is actually a big deal. Because now we're at 6 instead of 7, and there's a big difference between 6 and 7. Yeah, and I think that I have to counter this Lava Spike and then chump block the Swift Spear. I don't think that we can really ever win if we go down to 3. We're just not going to have... They will eventually draw 2 burn spells they can cast on the same turn, and it's just not going to be possible that we are able to hold up 2 counter spells for the entire game. So opponent didn't cast a burn spell there. I'm going to hope that they have a brick in their hand, a non-burn spell, and try to kill Monastery Swift Spear with Kolaghan's Command and return Snapcaster. I am certainly saying I will lose this game if they have a burn spell in hand, but I don't think that... I think that we're going to lose if they have one in hand anyways. It looks like they didn't, and we got rewarded. Unsure if this Wooded Foothills was that last card, or if that's what they drew for this turn and they just drew another brick. We'll probably find out soon enough. On our opponent's instep, I'm probably going to use these Field of Ruins to get my opponent off of white mana. Although I guess we should only use 1, that way we don't tap out of Drown. And Drown in the Lock you're certainly seeing, I think, why this matchup is not bad. It's that if this was just a Terminate, a Dreadboard, like a usual bad answer that you'd have to play in a deck like this, we could never win. But the fact that this could kill anything or counter anything is such a big deal. And it's also lucky our opponent's flooding out. I don't think we're going to win if they didn't here, being on the draw and stumbling on our lands. I'm going to use Cryptic Command here. in these matchups, I super aggressively use my cryptic commands just because they're so unwieldy. And whenever you're offered like a sorcery speed spell to counter with it, it's a huge game. I accidentally clicked my Creeping Tar Pit and was trying to get me to activate it. So yeah, opponent. I don't think our opponent timed this very well. I think usually you're supposed to just sandbag your burn spells as much as you can. I'm gonna cast Into the Story to try to hit my land drop here. We still have Drown up for another burn spell. And we could play Mystic Sanctuary and get a Drown on top of our deck, or we could just play a tapped Spirebluff Canal. I think I'm more in for the tapped Spirebluff Canal. 4 cards is one heck of a lot of cards, ladies and gents. Okay, opponent's flooding out really bad. It'd be kind of funny if they had the fetchable mountain that makes a dwarf token. Certainly gonna get back Drown in the Loch with this Mystic Sanctuary. Just 2 mana 1-for-1 anything is really, really solid in this spot. Yeah, I've been like so pleasantly surprised by how good the burn matchup feels. We're certainly, I think, getting a little lucky here, but I have 2-0 to burn a bunch with Grixis, which I played a lot of Grixis decks in my life. That doesn't usually happen. So let's go ahead and use our mana a little bit. I'm going to cast the Snapcaster Mage. And I think I'm just going to Lightning Bolt my opponent. Doesn't make a lot of sense to try to Kolaghan's Command, make them discard a card, because if their cards are instant speed burn spells, they're going to cast them. And we still have Cryptic Command plus Drown up here. Opponent might like Searing Blaze the Snapcaster, and I'll use my Cryptic. And then we get to untap. So I'm actually not going to cast the Bolt. I don't want to let any burn spell ever resolve. And like we just can't lose from this position probably. If they had another Searing Blaze there, it could have been bad. We can cast another Into the Story, draw 4 more cards. The opponent is also drawing a billion lands. It's unfortunate. Let's go ahead and use this Force of Negation. Just a little less wieldy than these Drown and Locks, and the opponent sees the writing on the wall and packs it up. In this matchup, I bring in 1 Force of Negation, 3 Collective Brutalities, I cut the Torrential Gearhulk, and I cut the Kolaghan's Commands. This card is pretty unwieldy. Like, sometimes you can get a 2-for-1 off of it, but it's so bad against Monastery Swift Spear. I've disliked Kolaghan's Command against Burn for some time now. And I will resume the recording. Oh, well. I keep planning on pausing the recording and then jumping into the next game, so there's not a bunch of dead air, but opponents are being kind to me. This is a very interesting hand. I think it's like almost certainly a keep, but I don't like that it's soft to a 1-mana creature. But I think a fast Tasigur, Force of Negations, and Spell Snares are something that you kind of have to keep in a hand like this, or in a matchup like this, I should say. And I'm gonna lead on Scalding Tarn to Spell Snare and Eidolon, potentially. I'd love to draw another land. If we can play Tasigur next turn, especially with Force of Negation up, we're going to be in good shape. Okay, I'm going to... Ooh, good timing here. I'm gonna force this, but good patience on that Boros Charm. So we need to find a fetch land. We could have gone a Watery Grave and shocked, but this is gonna be okay. We still have Spell Snare up. We can take another hit off of Monastery Swift Spear. Lava Spikes us. and helixes us. So we'll spell snare that. But we still take 3 down to 11. But our opponent has 2 cards in their hand. We have a Force of Negation. We're going to have a Tasigur in play. There's also a Collective Brutality. We should probably take the time to cast this. I think that I'm going to 2 modes, -2 and Duress, and then discard the Into the Story just because we don't have the mana to, just don't have 4 mana here, but then try to ride this Tasigur to victory. Your opponent doesn't have any more spells in their hand. Brutality being, always great against burn. Been great against burn for a long time, still great against burn. I'm not gonna force the Skewer, I don't think. Don't mind drawing another one of those. Yeah, drawing a second Brutality is super nice, especially that we're at a life total where the 2 life will put us out of range of 1 3 damage burn spell. Feeling pretty good. We have a pretty good clock in play. Kind of nice that Force of Negation doesn't make you pay 1 life like you have to do with Force of Will and Legacy. So I bet our opponent has a powerful 2 mana play here, like a Boros Charm, maybe a Rest in Peace. I've seen a bunch of people bring in Rest in Peace. Maybe our internet is crashing. Who knows? Ah, it was the crashing. Magic Online crashing. Okay, I'll pause the recording and we'll get back up. Okay, so I was right. Magic Online is being a little wonky. Jumping back into it. Turns out they were going to cast a Goblin Guide. If they attack here, that means they have Lightning Bolt. Because we just crashed, we don't know if they're actually deciding on whether or not to attack, or if they, are getting a glass of water or something because we were gone for a minute or so. But assuming that they are debating on whether or not to attack, that means their last card in hand is Lightning Bolt. And if it is Lightning Bolts, we will certainly block because we will take our 2 for 2 and force the Lightning Bolt. So opponent decides not to attack, so whether that is because we just got back or because they have Lightning Bolts in hand, is not going to change our play here of -2ing the Goblin Guide and draining our opponent. Don't want to duress if we think our opponent has a Lightning Bolt in hand, and also going up the difference between being at 11, if we could get a 3 damage burn spell out of our hand, and being at 10 is not that big. And it also does deal 2 damage to our opponent. And I like pitching the push here because I think it's unlikely we're going to need to kill another creature. And now that we already have Tasigur in play, we can pitch the Snapcaster to Force of Negation, or just cast the Snapcaster if we draw another blue card. There's no real reason to counter this Rest in Peace. Looks like Magic Online is buffering after the restart. You can play out the Scalding Tarn, I suppose, although I think it's going to be mainly to hardcast a Force of Negation, like a Path to Exile on a Tasigur. I'm feeling very ahead here. Rest in Peace is quite good against us. It turns off a huge portion of our deck. I think the 2 cards that are the biggest problem for this Grixis deck are Rest in Peace and 3 mana Teferi. Teferi Time Raveler. There is like a pretty big decline of Rest in Peace in the modern format, but of course if Dredge gets more popular, I think our deck may get worse. Yeah, I'll go ahead and cast a Lightning Helix on this, or a Force Negation on this Helix. It does increase the clock for them by 1. It lets us use our mana, and we can maybe now use our mana to activate Creeping Tarpit, or just cast a Snapcaster Mage. Yeah, see, now Drown in the Luck has no text because of Rest in Peace. So, I mean, maybe they have I mean, I do kind of think their last card is Lightning Bolts based on how they've played in the past, but it is not as clear as it could be if we didn't have those internet problems. That being said, even if they do find a path for the Tastiger, they're dead to Tarpit plus Snapcaster attack next turn if we draw a Black Source. Yeah, we 2-0'd burn, so we are 2-0, 4-0, beating Lancer, Control, and Burn. We'll be back for the third round in a second. Yeah, so Magic Online's being super weird. I'm having to restart it every like 15-20 minutes or so. We'll try to power through. We're gonna go to 5 cards. Mulliganing to 5 on the play is never really where you want to be in any format, especially Modern. Opponent looks like they did mulligan to 6, and then we lost connection, and they're keeping 6. We're going to keep this 5, although it's not very good. I think we want to put back the Gear Hulk and an island. Kind of close. But we're going to need to draw very well. I mean, if our opponent turns on our Into the Story, we're going to be in really good shape. We're playing against Blooming Marsh Birds of Paradise. Maybe I just played too much Magic, but I think our opponent's playing the Black-Green Yawgmoth deck. We actually were the builders of the Sultai and 4-color Yawgmoth decks. I was the first person to play Hapatra plus Yawgmoth, but looks like our opponent's not on that, so we can stop humble bragging or whatever. Yeah, if we're going to play the Mystic Sanctuary on turn 1, I guess we could have kept the island. It's pretty unclear. Hand is pretty clunky. Not sure what's going on our opponent's side of the field. Looks like it's some kind of planeswalker-y brew. I don't remember seeing anybody besides old Saffron Olive playing with Nissa Steward of Elements in Modern these days. But even though we mulligan to 5 on the play and our draw is quite clunky, we're not necessarily out of it here. And there's always games 2 and 3, right? They let you play best 2 out of 3 in matches of Modern these days. Just super nice of them. I'm just gonna Spell Snare. I thought about Field of Ruin getting an island and Spell Snare, but I think that we may need the Field of Ruin to get us red mana, just because we're so just light on resources after this mulligan. And they got a land off Nissa. They knew they were going to get it off of the Scry. They also thought they were going to get it off the Coiling Oracle. Interesting. So I think usually when you're so far behind in a match like this, and you're playing against a weird deck like we are, it's really important to spend as much time before you concede and really get a feel for what's going on if you're unsure, like we are. Like our opponent could be playing Aetherworks Marvel, they could be playing Soul Herder. They've got a really weird combination of cards over there. I played a lot of Rogue Refiner in Standard, as did a lot of people. That card was really good. If our opponent just dirtles for forever, like we can certainly still win this game. They put 2 cards on top, which we can maybe shuffle away with Field of Ruin here. I mean, if they're low on gas too, although this Nissa can smack us for 10. Don't like that. But let's Field of Ruin. Getting a mountain. So they're going to need to draw one of the 2 cards they put on top. But it's got a weird deck over there. Like, you would expect them to be playing Soul Herder with a lot of these value into the battlefield creatures, but we haven't seen white... Oh, I got an island and not a mountain. I have not been on top of my game this league. I find that I've gotten really used to streaming and playing, but for whatever reason, I have like this mental block about recording and playing. I always feel like I play much worse when I'm recording. Yeah, if we were able to like spell snare this and then Kolaghan's Command get 2 more cards in their graveyard with you know, the shock and the discard, then have Into the Story be live, I think that we were going to be in decent shape. So they zeroed Nissa and then they didn't hit anything, which means that there's a spell on top of their deck. It's not good. I think maybe they forgot that they shuffled. I certainly do want to make more of these recordings, but for whatever reason, I find it way harder to record than to stream. So I think it's just kind of different for everyone, you know? We do have reason to think our opponent has a spell on top of their deck. Oh, are they going to Field of Ruin? I think that's good for us. That's great for us. That's so good for us. Okay, so we're going to float, you know, Grixis colors, and then get an island, our last basic land. And then that's going to put card 5 in our opponent's graveyard, and then this is going to put cards 6 and 7. That's another good reason why I like Kolaghan's Command, is it just puts 2 cards in your opponent's graveyard. Suppose we should probably cast Into the Story now. Like, opponent discards a Chord of Calling. Maybe we'll Into the Story on our opponent's upkeep. I don't know if they're going to have another chord. Opponent's deck is so weird. I don't know. I have no idea what's going on. We're on turn 6. Okay. Well, we drew a Cryptic Command and another Into the Story, so if we untap here, you know, we're going to keep fighting. Okay, they hit a Ravenous Chupacabra. We're 2-0. Like, usually you're paired against people with similar records as you. So opponent, I imagine, is finding some success with whatever's happening over here. I bet they'll play some card at some point in this match, and we'll go, oh, that brings all of this together. And I'm having a hard time thinking what this mystery card that they're building around is, but surely there's something. I imagine that there's some rhyme to this reason, or some. I don't know. Kind of weird that they went after. I mean, I guess we only had the Watery Grave to target, but yeah, I'll take 3 for now. Take a 3 for now. So they're finally gonna, you know, bring this Nissa to ultimate. This the ultimate only makes the elementals 5/5s until end of turn. So if we use Cryptic Command to tap all our opponent's creatures and draw a card, then they're gonna waste the ultimate. So why don't we draw 4 freaking cards with Into the Story. It's a lot of cards. I guess we should have tapped the swamp instead of the island because of the Urborg. Don't imagine it's gonna matter, but we'll see. This Rogue Refiner is, like, the Rogue Refiner, the Nissa, and the Ravenous Chupacabra are all really throwing me off. Modern is super weird right now. The format is very, very open. You can play, in my opinion, almost anything you want as long as you have a good reason to be playing what you're playing. Like, if you think that Drown in the Lock and Into the Story are really powerful and well positioned, then Grixis is good. And if you think Stoneforge Mystic in an aggressive deck is going to be good, and you think it's good with Force of Negation, then like a blue-white aggressive Stoneforge Mystic deck is good. It's, yeah, I think as long as you have a good reason to be doing what you're doing, I think you can play most things. I do think that we should Fatal Push something here. I think we can Fatal Push the Ravenous Chupacabra. I'm gonna get a Steam Vents because it makes all 3 colors of mana with Urboard. And so next turn we can Cryptic to stop the ultimate, I guess, and then take it from there. You know, we mulligan to 5 on the play in a 3-color mid-range mirror, and we are all of a sudden winning, and I'm not really sure how. I'm sure you guys are as perplexed as I am. There is an intrinsic value to playing with a brew like our opponent is playing, and like that your control opponents just have no idea what's going on. It makes them less likely to make optimal plays if they are playing without information. I'm gonna tap draw here. See if our opponent uses this floating blue and black mana for anything. We can counter an 8-drop with Drown, but we can also, you know, counter tap something if they play something bigger than that. But, you know, who knows what's going on over there. I really wish I was streaming right now so I could see all of my wonderful Twitch friends' reactions to this live. All right, they're playing a spell. So I feel like we're probably going to counter tap with this Cryptic. Court of Calling for 4. I kind of want to let this resolve to figure out what's happening, but I don't think that that's actually advisable. We're going to go and counter this and tap our opponent's field. And we don't have I wish we had a Snapcaster or a Gearhulk to return with this Kolaghan's command, but we can at least get Nissa off the field and then make our opponent discard one of their cards and maybe glean a little more information. Who knows? Leaving up our Grixis land. They're down to 1 card in hand. They discarded a Kitchen Finks, so we can... Ooh, that's going to be good. That's going to be really good. So we can drown, most likely, whatever that last card is, and then Gearhulk flashback into the story and win this game. Yeah, we can drown this. I imagine this is the last card they kept. If there's something else really good here, we can Gearhulk it. That's fine. I think I'm going to Gearhulk, target Cryptic Command, and then bounce the Gearhulk and counter the Murderous Redcap, and then we can still Torrential Gearhulk back into the story and draw 4 cards. And if we get to do that, I can't imagine we're going to lose this game. Okay. So we're up a game against Sultai mid-range nonsense. The Damnation looks kind of good here, I guess. I don't think the forces are very good. They seem to be mostly creature-based, and one of their big non-creature spells is Court of Calling, which they're going to cast on our turn. Bringing in Engineered Explosives. Don't want to overboards, and so, I mean our answers are like for pretty generic threats, and that also seems like what our opponent is playing. Maybe if we go to game 3, we'll figure out what's going on, but it does look like our deck lines up well against our opponents, and if we're gonna mulligan on to 5 on the play and still win a match like that, or a game like that, I think that we're gonna be good for games 2 and 3. I will say the last game was a good example that this deck does not mulligan very well. It needs to trade resources early and then try to resolve into the story. And if you don't have resources to trade early, into the story gets much worse. Right, I'm going to pause the recording and then we'll pick it back up for game number 2. Alright, so we are on the draw, game 2 against Sultai Midrange Nonsense. Let me make sure the recording is going. Yes. Don't know what we're playing against, but I do know that, I know roughly what's going on. But Spell Snare is usually good on the draw. We have a fast Tassiger. I think this hand is fine. In these mid-range matchups, I'm usually not too concerned if my opponent thought seizes me on the play. You know, they are making an inherently tempo negative play to trade 1-for-1 when they're already just like a tiny bit behind on resources, but obviously not a very big deal. They're playing this into Spell Snare here, but I think I'm going to bite and Spell Snare it. So there's the Malera. We saw Kitchen Finks and Murderous Redcap, so I guess they're like, you know, Sultai Malera combo, which seems very weird to me. Don't really get it. I'm gonna Thought Scour my opponent. Bolt the bird. Put the 7th card in my opponent's graveyard. Try to hit a land drop. No land drop is bad, but our opponent also missed a land drop. We have a bunch of cheap removal spells. I think we're going to be fine. Although they hit their 3rd land drop before we did. So that could bode not well. Ashiok is not great for us here, but again, it doesn't exile cards from their graveyard. So I don't think this is going to win on its own. And we can bolt it if they minus again. Kitchen Finks is good here. Kitchen Finks is good here. Play it, and they found another land, so 2 lands off the top for our opponent. And then they very wisely do not minus the Ashiok again. I will go ahead and send a bolt over there. If we draw a fetch land, we're going to need to fetch. Yeah, we're on the draw. We kept a 2-lander, and we've drawn 7 cards, and we haven't found another land. So you guys can do the math on that one. This deck looks fun. I was hoping that they were playing Yawgmoth. I do feel like Sultai usually means that they have this card in their deck. It's probably not very beatable. I'm gonna go ahead and bolt the Ashiok and hope that we draw a fetch land for the Fatal Push on the Yawgmoth. Can't cast that. I'm getting pretty close to conceding, but we'll give it a couple more turns. You're just not going to win if you keep a 2-lander and draw 8 cards and not hit a land, and that's okay. That's going to happen sometimes. That's why they give you three whole games to win a match of Magic. So we can kind of discuss how Yawgmoth interacts with some of these creatures. Yawgmoth is usually better with Undying creatures rather than Persist creatures, so I'm kind of surprised to not see any creatures that have Undying yet out of our opponent. So like usually you sack 1 Undying creature, it comes back with a +1/+1 counter, you sack another one, and then you put a -1/-1 counter on the creature that came back. Alright, let's go to game 3. Certainly got the wrong end of the variance stick there. Now, how does the knowledge of Yawgmoth change the equation? So Surgical is good if they sack an Undying or a Persist creature, and you can Surgical those in response. But we actually haven't seen any Undying creatures. We've only seen like a couple of Kitchen Finks. And Engineered Explosives doesn't answer Yawgmoth itself. I think that we're going to run it back like this. I know when I was playing a Sultai Yawgmoth deck, I really liked Neoform and Undying creatures, but we haven't seen any of those cards yet, and we've seen a lot of our opponent's cards. All right, we're mulliganing again. I'm going to keep this, I'm going to put back the Tasigur. Tasigur wasn't going to be online for a little bit, and we're going to want to probably Snapcast back Bolt anyways. Let's get a Watery Grave. Yeah, I think we've drawn pretty awkward hands this match. Certainly has not looked as good this match as against our first two, but we're still very alive. Looks like our opponent's kept a slow hand as well. Although our hand was hoping to trade resources early, and not thrilled that we're not going to get to do that. Maybe they have an Ice Fang here. Yeah. Now, all these value creatures certainly do add up. So if they play a 2-drop, we can kill the Ice Fang and then counter the 2-drop. Yeah, but Kitchen Finks is not be easy to answer. Yeah, you can certainly see, I think this match has been a good lesson in when you can't trade resources effectively early, your deck just looks a lot worse. I'm going to go ahead and bolt the Rogue Refiner. And I'm thinking about Snapcaster bolting the Ice Fang, but for now, let's just go ahead and play just a little more patiently, and hopefully we can find a more valuable play to Snapcaster back, like Kolaghan's Command. So we may be in business now. We can now counter probably a 4-drop if we Kolaghan's Command, kill Ice Fang. And then we can Snapcaster Kolaghan's Command and deal with this Kitchen Finks. And maybe we can Mystic Sanctuary back Kolaghan's Command as well. So do like that draw. We need to find some action. So I think we're going to do this kind of regardless of what happens. So let's just do it now to not take 1 more point of damage. I like targeting the Ice Fang here, so this way our Drown is just a little bit better. Now they have 4 cards in their graveyard. They shock with the Breeding Pool. So we can counter a 5-drop if they sack the Verdant Catacombs, which they'll need to if they want to play a 5-drop. I'll counter a Kitchen Finks, although it kind of like they shocked with this Breeding Pool. So I don't know if they have another play or what that means. Okay, Cryptic was a good draw. Yeah, drawing these commands, we're getting back into this game. So here's a 2-drop. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and counter draw this. And then we're going to get back Kolaghan's Command or Cryptic Command, depending on what happens here. They shocked with the Watery Grave, so they're representing Chord for 3. I mean, that's fine. I think it's going to get another Kitchen Finks. Rogue Refiner. Eternal Witness. Getting back Chord of Calling. They have 3 cards in their hand. And this is going to be tough. I think I'm going to get back Cryptic. Oh, damn it. Spire Bluff now throwing me off. That actually may have been a game-losing mistake. Not being able to Mystic Sanctuary something back there. Certainly have not played very well this league. Even though I've been playing a ton with the deck, still easy to make mistakes with these new cards. So I'm going to play out Snapcaster Mage. Target Kolaghan's Command, and then go to blocks. Let's block the Kitchen Finks. And then we can kill the Kitchen Finks and return the Snapcaster Mage, and then they can convoke for a Yawgmoth in response. And then we can push the Yawgmoth, so certainly not like the best exchange for us, but it's about all we got. I guess they can get a 5-drop. I mean, they may have like something weird like a Thragtusk. Obviously, our opponent's deck is just strange. They also played a Lumbering Falls, which is also tough here. They got a Chord of Calling. So is this a Scavenging Ooze? Yeah. Yeah. Well, we still get to kill Kitchen Finks. So why don't we untap, see what we draw. Island. Alright, let's concede. Interesting deck from our opponent. Oh, there was a Into the Story on top. I do think that we could have played better this match. It was certainly hard to play against this weird pile of Sultai cards, but I'm going to keep this hand and hope that these 1-mana removal spells are good in this matchup. Opponent kept 7. Play this Tar Pit and pass. So we're either playing against Paradoxical Urza or Grixis Death Shadow. Now usually if we're playing against Grixis Death Shadow, they'll crack their baubles pretty aggressively. So I think we're seeing that happen now. Although they got a tapped Steam Vents instead of an untapped one, so still unclear what we're up against. I think this hand is probably fine against either. Alright, so Pithing Needle means we're playing against Urza, so let's go ahead and fetch in response to Pithing Needle so they can't name Polluted Delta. And we can Kolaghan's Command it if they name something relevant. This is a matchup I feel relatively comfortable in, about as comfortable as you can feel against a kind of busted combo deck. They are kind of soft to counter spells, and we are a deck full of counter spells. Well, they named Jace the Mind Sculptor, and they, I guess, haven't been looking at MTG Goldfish, because that card is not in my deck. There was a deck that I think top 4 to a PTQ today that was playing 1 Jace the Mind Sculptor and 2 Into the Stories. I do think Into the Story is just better than Jace the Mind Sculptor in a deck like this, but this is certainly not a bad name. There aren't a ton of good targets in my deck for this. So we would like to draw some lands here. Kind of wish that we had had a Thought Scour to to flashback with Snapcaster here. I'm going to go ahead and just fix my mana a little bit with Field of Ruin. Our opponent's missing land drops too. I think things are fine here. Don't mind drawing a land. Could consider, if our opponent misses a land drop, I'm probably going to Bolt Snap Bolt here and just put some pressure on. Mox Opal, huh? Mox Opal pass. Yeah, let's go ahead and Bolt Snap Bolt. We need to get Blood Crypt to do it. That's fine. This used to be the Scourge of Modern, Bolt Snap Bolt in the Splinter Twin decks. We have Drown in the Lockup, X equals 3, and our opponent's stuck on 2 lands, so this should be able to counter just about anything our opponent plays. Especially if they crack their Tarn. I'm going to be a little bummed if our opponent concedes now, which they do kind of wisely, because we don't know if our opponent's playing the Paradoxical Urza deck or still if they're on a more Thopter Sword oriented strategy. Because I board out the Spell Snares against the Paradoxical version, and I leave them in against the Thopter Sword deck. But I do think the Paradoxical version is more popular right now, so that's how we're going to sideboard. Let me just go ahead and get my spells. Something that's funny is everyone's freaking out about Emery being really powerful, but I do think Emery is a super strong Magic card. She turns on Lightning Bolts. Like, Lightning Bolts used to be a card that was more or less dead in a matchup like this, and now your Lightning Bolts have a pretty juicy target. So I've been sideboarding somewhat like this, sideboarding out the Spell Snares, boarding in the Bolts. I don't really like bringing in Ceremonious Rejection just because it really just counters their 0 mana artifacts that are very replaceable and aren't very impactful to the board. I prefer to counter their Urzas, their size, their Paradoxical Outcomes. So this is another matchup where I really like Force of Negation because of Paradoxical Outcome. We like Vanillion Click. Explosives on 0 is great in this matchup. I have felt pretty favored against this deck, so. Well, we're going to mulligan this hand. We can keep this one. I'm going to put back the Field of Ruin. It's not super important. They play a ton of basics usually. We're going to hope that we draw a pretty powerful interactive play earlier. So this Mox, yeah, so I was going to say Mox Amber is going to make it more likely that they're on Emery, but also Emery means it's more likely. They milled 3 really powerful threats. I'm glad this wasn't the top 3 cards of their library, although, we are, the deck that has a ton of 1-mana answers to this card, but we haven't drawn any. Another thing is Emery makes our Drowned blocks and Into the Stories more powerful, which is nice. But we're probably going to be dead here. We've stumbled and our opponent has had their fastest draw on the play. So 2 kind of uninteractive, boring games I think we're going to have here, and maybe we can have a more fun one in game 3, but our opponent is also not necessarily trying to play fun and interactive Magic. If we draw a removal spell for Emery here, we could still win this game, but that's interesting. I'm going to go ahead and Explosives on 0 now. They still have Emery. They still get to sack their Opal, and they still get to replay things, but it's going to slow them down. And if we draw a removal spell next turn, then then we're going to untap with a bunch of Cryptic Commands. So that's nice. I still like the split of 4 push and 1 bolt in this matchup. I don't think you can have so many answers to Emery, and push kills Urza as well as Emery. Okay, well, we're gonna hope our opponent is out of gas. And if they just cantrip a couple of times, and we get to hold their Cryptic next turn, and then maybe Into the Story, we're gonna win. Maybe. Like, sometimes they do just draw air, and Emery becomes tap draw card, which is a very powerful effect, you know, a Phyrexian Arena. But we will lose to Urza here. I'll concede. I will certainly concede to this. All right, so we sideboarded against the correct version, so we mulliganed into a hand that was not great, and they had a very powerful start. So let's hope our draw lines up better against theirs. While I said I do feel favored in this matchup, I think our opponent's deck is really, really explosive and has a lot of powerful threats, and it's still not easy, even if you are favored. So if our opponent did play Imri, we're going to be able to drown it because Imri puts 4 cards in our opponent's graveyard, but it looks like they did not have her in their opening hand. And looks like they kept a 1-lander without the ability to turn on their Mox Opal, which is kind of weird, a little inadvisable. If we had gone fetch land, then we could have played Tasigur here, but it's fine. We can also counter a 0-drop if they play 1 to turn on their Opal, which I would have done if they had played 1. So 3 pretty boring games, probably. I mean, our opponent could theoretically draw out of this, but I don't think it's very likely at this point in the game. I think they may even just concede here, yeah. So sorry about that. That was kind of a boring match, but we're 3-1. Lost to this weird Sultai deck, beat Lancer Control, and then 2-0 burn. So we'll be back for the 5th and final match of this league. So we are on the draw for the last match of this league. Hope you guys have enjoyed the video so far. Hope you've learned something. Hope you've had a good time. You recognize my opponent's username. I'm worried that means, yep, we're playing against Dredge. Not a great matchup at all. I'm not sure if this is our worst matchup or if Eldrazi is, but I felt very unfavored against Dredge so far. Spell Snare helps, Force of Negation helps, but I really think you have to just lean on drawing a functional hand and multiple surgical extractions in games 2 and 3, which is just not usually winning, like something that you can do. Opponents had a very powerful start here, and they've had a powerful start that was not even fragile to a Spell Snare, which is brutal for us. So that was one of the few ways we could potentially get out of this. I will go ahead and cast this Tasigur here. We are exiling our Torrential Gearhulk, which is kind of sad. Like Gearhulking back some cryptic commands and smacking for 5 a bunch is potentially a way you can just overpower your opponent in a game like this. But we're gonna do our darndest. Our opponent has not hit an actual Dredger yet, although they just hit 2 off their Shriekhorn. I don't know why I said anything. They're going to Dredge Stinkweed Imp, and they're going to hit another Bloodghast and a Narcomoeba. And then they had Cathartic Reunion, and they were playing around Spell Snare. Yep, we're about to go to game 2. They're about to get 3 more prized amalgams here. We just don't have recourse. Rough stuff. Game 1 is really, really hard. I have certainly thought a lot about this Dredge matchup and the fact that it's really bad. And we had Ashiok's in our first build, and Ashiok is certainly much better in this matchup. And then Surgical is. But Ashiok's also kind of bad with Into the Story and Drown, and Surgical is good against Tron. So I think that you probably just want to tank the percentage points, like accept that you're probably not going to win against Dredge, and when you do get paired against it, hope to get a little bit lucky. So I kind of go back and forth on whether or not I like Damnation or the first Kolaghan's Command. I've been playing the first Kolaghan's Command, but I'm not sure. But But I do like cutting the Fatal Push. I do like having access to not a ton of Kolaghan's commands just because the discard mode and the most modes are just pretty medium. Like ideally, like you could return a Gear Hulk that you mill over, and then start flashing back some Cryptics. I think that's the most ideal way to win. But we're gonna hope to get kind of lucky. We're gonna hope to force their Life from the Loams, or maybe Spell Snare some Cathartic Reunions. Draw a Surgical and a Snapcaster is certainly a way to win a match against Dredge, and we will be back for game 2. Gonna mulligan this hand. We don't have any of our powerful sideboard cards. Same with this hand. I think it's too slow. Dredge is also a deck that mulligans a lot, so we're gonna hope that our opponent doesn't keep 7, and they kept 7. So I think we need to keep this 5, maybe. If we keep this 5, we're gonna put back Cryptic Command and Creeping Tar Pit. Problem is, like, we just can't cast this Tasigur. Yeah, I think I want to look for a Surgical Extraction here. Yeah, maybe we should have kept that 5-card hand. I even think a 3-card hand with Surgical is better than a 4-card hand, but certainly some questionable mulligan decisions there. It was a hard spot. Didn't find our graveyard hate in a very rough matchup. But I hope you learned some stuff. I hope you tune into the stream. We're going to be playing some more Grixis. I have found a lot of success with this deck, albeit this league I decided to record with was super strange. I've been Aspiring Spike, and I will see you maybe some more on YouTube, but primarily on Twitch. All right, bye.